talking about this morning?
Anatomy.
Anatomy.
Yeah, I know.
Of the
I know.
human body.
Well, you had made a comment last week about really not wanting to watch the movie, and I completely understand that. And we had both
We're
agreed
talking
that
about Cuties, the
Yes.
network, the Netflix film that's
Netflix
under
film.
fire.
We had both agreed that ignorance was not education. Most beneficial things about having that conversation is, one, open communication, and two, prevention of sexual abuse and increasing your child's safety. And
Right.
so that's really where we want to start today.
But it's awkward for, it is for a dad to have that talk with a daughter.
And-
it's easier with my sons.
And that's exactly where we're going to come from today, is how to do it as a dad. And,
Because I'm like, I have no experience being a woman. So
Well, that doesn't matter.
I'm shooting from the hip.
That doesn't matter.
Guessing as to what it feels like to be, I mean, sure, I
Well,
can give them common sense, but guys, my sons, it's easy because
we are only talking about the very basics here
Right.
today. So and we'll continue this dialogue for a number of weeks to come. But
Now-
in just thinking about talking to your small children, starting early on
and at
about
what age?
what their body parts are.
yeah, what age do you start that?
Whenever they're ready, as soon as they're able to start identifying things, if they can tell you what their hand is and their arm is, head, shoulders, knees and toes type thing, and we can actually do the sing-along, then we're ready to talk about anatomy as a whole. Yes. So it's never too early. And like we talked about, ignorance is not education, and so avoiding it does not do you or them any favors at all.
Right.
So the first thing that it does is it opens up lines of communication, because kids need to know, as your parent, especially as their dad, that they can come to you with anything at any time and that you'll be able to talk about it openly. And in talking about sexuality and having a penis and a vagina, that is building the bridge to communication. It will make life so much easier for you as a parent when you can start that conversation.
And by not talking about it, don't you create a little bit of taboo on
We
those
do.
parts? And
We
that
do.
creates more giggles and snickers in the classroom when the word should come up in an
Yes,
educational environment.
And not just that, but when we don't talk about it, we think that those things are shameful, or that they're embarrassing, or that we shouldn't have those feelings or desires. And that isn't accurate at all. I have men in my office all the time who have a pornography problem or have some type of sexual issue. And even grown men will say, I don't want to have that desire. And I have to say, look, you're a man, you're wired that way. And having the thought versus acting on it are two very different things. And so when we look at talking to our kids, one struggle that a lot of the guys that I see have is that once we have seen major trauma, or we've seen major trauma against women, we have a really hard time talking to our daughters about it. And dads want to, some dads want to pass that on to mom. And in some relationships that's good, but it's always good for dad to be equipped to talk about those things too.
Right.
So
I think moms would talk more in depth with some of the issues that
possibly.
are happening through
Possibly.
life.
And as
But
a
men
country
are very
kid,
qualified to do it. And I'm not
Yes.
taking anything away from men, because there are
Yes.
men that do it and have done it successfully.
Yes, absolutely. And I was raised by one of those. I remember my dad taking me out as a good farm kid. We went out into the pasture and we looked at the cattle and we looked at the bull and we looked at the cows, and that was how he explained the sex talk.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
it's a good way. It's part
So,
of it's a natural
is.
thing in our world. It seems that human behavior and the mental, I guess, the psyche of some people are what make it dirty and make it filthy
Well,
and make things
I
nasty.
think it becomes
bad.
that way inadvertently because parents are so uncomfortable.
Right.
But I will say there's a number of resources out there that we can hit on at the end of the show. And if you're a parent who feels like you need a little bit of an extra coaching session before you go into that, by all means go read up. I will say windshield time is perfect when your kids are trapped in the car with you. You can't run away. That's a great time to talk about it. One of the safety issues in preventing sexual abuse and teaching your kids the correct terms, the correct anatomical terms, is that they will be able to communicate with you what's going on. And so back in my child welfare years, I would see kids who had been sexually abused, and some of them would use other words for their genitalia that had nothing to do with genitalia whatsoever. And I remember examples like rooster, cookie, all sorts of random things that you would never think that a child should be calling their private parts those names. And so when we have kids who have potentially been hurt and they come in for an interview, they don't know how to tell the investigator or the interviewer their body parts because they call it something completely different than what it actually is.
Right. And that makes it hard for the interviewer.
Which makes it hard for the interviewer. It makes it hard for everybody, the attorneys. It makes it hard for all the adults involved who actually know the correct terms.
Well,
it's safer if they know the exact parts that they own, that are on their body, and that are on the opposite gender's body. And so it's not just educating them about what they possess, but also about what others possess. And really teaching them that we are not to allow other people to those private areas unless you give them permission, unless mom and dad give permission, and unless mom and dad are present. So a healthy example of that would be going to the doctor.
Right.
Okay, because child gives permission, adults give permission, parents are present. Okay.
Right.
In thinking about that, we have to acknowledge that 98%, if I remember correctly, of sex abuse occurs in the victim's own home.
It's a crazy number.
It's
supposed to be
not,
the safest place in the world.
Which is supposed to be the safest place, but you have to think about how many people have access to that child and how many people are in and out of that home, or if it's unstable or stable, those kinds of things. But, Gallup did a poll in 2017, 2018 that said that 67% of parents are using the correct anatomical terms. So that's excellent. 6 out of 10 of us are using correct anatomical terms. There's only about 3 out of 10 that are not. And so if we could just tweak that a little bit,
so
we'd still be
we
better
want
off.
to use the medical terminology.
Yes, absolutely. If you own a penis, call it a penis. If you own a vagina, call it a vagina.
Right.
Okay, your bottom is your bottom. Whatever, wherever or whatever your kids possess is what we need to distinctly call that.
Right. It
So.
seems like that anytime you have a sexual education class in school or you get a group of kids together, there's always the giggling, the snickering, the whatever. And a lot of that comes from some kids that just haven't heard the word enough, aren't familiar enough, that it's been taboo possibly in their life. They're going to laugh at that.
And that's why dads are so important, because dads are the leaders of our homes. They are the heads of households for the most part, unless dad is absent. But dads have a very important role, because while your relationship with your sons is important, we teach them to be good, gentle men as we bring them up into adulthood. The relationship with daughters is equally, some would argue, maybe more important than the relationship with fathers and sons, because daughters and dads have a very special bond, and that is ultimately the same as mothers and sons. Ultimately, we end up choosing spouses based on our initial relationship with our parents. And so dads have a really important role, and we cannot say that moms can replace dads and dads can replace moms, because they can't. Dads are so invaluable, and we minimize that in today's society. We think that every household can do without one, and that simply is not the case. Dads, you are so valuable. I cannot tell you this enough. You have to start talking to your kids about these things.
Right. And a lot of other things.
And a lot of other things.
Be a good leader.
Yes, but this will build that bridge to good communication about, and I don't hate to say this is a very positive thing. If you can talk to your kids about sex and sexual anatomy, you can talk to them about anything.
True.
Yeah. So
I've
once
always
we build
been
that
able
bridge,
to. Not that it was always harder for the girls.
What made it so hard?
I'm not talking about the anatomy part. I mean, that's easy, and of course, if anyone touches you here, had all those talks. Talking about later through life as they go.
Adolescence.
They start going through adolescence and what they're feeling and how to deal with it. I'm like, I have no idea how to deal with this. I don't know. I'll go into Walmart for you. I don't even know what product we're supposed to buy when they hit that point, but I'm going to find out. But that's where Mom, what in the world do we need to do here? How do we solve this problem? But I was always involved in that. And I think that the closeness that I've had with my kids, they would still to this day call me and tell me literally anything that is inappropriate going on in their lives, sexually or well beyond that. I mean,
and that's because let me put it to you this way. If you invest the time and you put in the work on the front end, things will be much easier for you on the back end. In other words, if I invest in them when they're 2, 3, 4 years old and we open that dialogue when they hit 14, 15, or 16, the well has already been primed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, life is going to be a lot easier on you.
I don't know how early we started. It wasn't as early as you're saying.
Yeah,
We weren't at 2, 3, and 4.
I started pretty early with mine, but you got to remember, with my job, it's not abnormal. I talk about it all the time, and it's it's comical because I have grown men who come into my office and they can spill pretty much anything, but man, when it gets to sex, they turn a little red. They kind of look the other way, and I have to say, it's okay. We can talk about sex. Don't be embarrassed by it. And sometimes I have to openly bring it up and say, yeah, well, here's my guess is what's going on, and they'll say, yeah, you're right, Doc. That is exactly what's going on.
Why is it so hard for people to talk about it? I mean, I guess it is a very private thing, but when you're talking with a licensed therapist and you have issues in your life, and possibly there's problems in that area, that just like anything else. I mean, it's uncomfortable having a doctor look a lot of places on your body. Just having a therapist look into your mind and what's going on there.
Yeah, colonoscopies look easy because you get to be knocked out during that process.
Yeah.
I think they're just such intimate thoughts and shared moments with a partner that sometimes we feel like we're violating trust when we bring it up in session, or we just feel embarrassed that maybe things aren't going as smoothly as we want.
Because a lot of men especially will put their personality or their ego-driven personality.
Their worth is
absolutely,
based
on how they can.
Which is really ironic because we put so much value on, like we talked about last week, over-sexualizing women, but we do the same thing to men too.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that, but it's true.
In the future weeks, we're going to talk about how to talk to your kids about pornography, all of those other kinds of things. But I will say, if you're on the Christian side of it, Focus on the Family has a ton of resources. If you're not,
we broadcast that, by the way, at about 5:50 in the morning. So.
Well, that's why I didn't know it, because I'm just getting up.
Great program. We do it every morning, every weekday morning.
The other one, if you're not of the Christian following or you don't want to teach that, is SASH, and I believe it's Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health, and they have a lot of resources, a lot of good stuff for families. I've taken a few of their trainings, and so there's a ton of information out there, but we want good information. We don't just want misinformation.
Thanks for coming in this morning.
Sure, always a pleasure.
So, have any resources for how to have that talk, or maybe how to train your child?
Focus on the Family is a great one, and then SASH is also a great one.
Just the two.
Society for Advancement of Sexual. Well, those are the two that I know for sure have quality information.
Okay.
There are lots of other websites out there, but I am really picky about what I use and who I like.
I mean, I was thinking maybe there'd be like a Cliff's Notes or
that basically is the Cliff Notes.
Dummy's guide to, talking to your children about anatomy and how to properly identify things.
This broadcasting and more broadcasting will be the Dummy's Guide then. How about that? So our chapter 1 of the Dummy's Guide is use the right terms.
That's Rich, licensed therapist here this morning. Some great information. And you have a ton of resources available. Find her on YouTube. The easiest way, Rich Consulting. Got a lot of videos up there, past episodes and more. And this will be posted a little bit later today.